My name is Heidi Gray, 34 years old, and I built my financial consulting firm from scratch after that nightmare family dinner in Indianapolis 10 years ago. My sister's husband Quentin called me a thief right to my face, accusing me of stealing from our family's savings. Instead of defending me, my sister Pamela slapped me hard across the cheek and screamed for me to get out. My mom Rita joined in, shoving me toward the door like I was some intruder. I stood there stunned, the room spinning, but I didn't fight back. I just grabbed my coat and walked out into the night. Silence my only response. At family dinner, my sister slapped me and kicked me out after her husband called me a thief. My mom joined in and shoved me outside. I left in silence. Just 1 week later, I did something that made the whole house fall. Within minutes, my phone blew up with 36 calls, and she was at my door. Before I get to my story, I want to know what time and what city you are listening in. I'm happy to know how far my story goes. Growing up in Indianapolis, Pamela Lane and I were inseparable. She was 4 years older, but we navigated everything together in our modest neighborhood, where summers meant pickup basketball games at the local park, and winters brought sledding down the snowy hills near Eagle Creek Reservoir. Our bond felt unbreakable, especially when the cracks in our parents' marriage started showing. I was 10 when the fights escalated, Rita yelling at Robert over money and his late nights at work. By the time I turned 14, Dad packed his bags and left for good, moving to a small apartment across town. Mom fell apart, spending days in bed, barely managing to get up for her shift at the hospital. Pamela, at 18, stepped up without complaint. She drove me to school in her beat-up Ford, made sure we had microwave dinners when Mom couldn't cook, and even helped with my algebra homework despite her own community college classes. We'd sit on the front porch after dark, sharing dreams under the Indiana stars. Mine was to build a financial firm that helped families like ours avoid the debt traps that tore us apart. Hers was simpler, wanting us to stay close and maybe start a business together someday. Pamela and Heidi's financial empire, she'd joke, waving her hands like we were already tycoons, when I got bullied in middle school for my hand-me-down clothes. Pamela marched right into the principal's office and demanded action. Those kids backed off fast, and she taught me to stand tall. Her protection made me feel safe in a world that suddenly wasn't. Pamela turned down a scholarship to Purdue to stay local and help with Mom. She enrolled at IUPUI instead, juggling classes and part-time jobs at a downtown cafe. I threw myself into studies, earning a full ride to Indiana University. When my acceptance letter came, Pamela was the first I told. She hugged me tight, her pride shining through even as she worried about me leaving. "This is your ticket out," she'd say. "Make it count for both of us." During my sophomore year, Pamela met Quentin Lane in her business class. He had that polished charm, with slick hair and stories of his family's real estate deals. Their relationship moved fast, dates turning into weekends away. At first, Quentin seemed supportive, joining our family dinners and laughing at Pamela's jokes. But I noticed the shifts. Small at first, he'd question my closeness to Pamela, saying things like, "You two are like twins, but she's starting her own life now." Pamela started canceling our sister hangouts, claiming Quentin needed her for some event or another. Quentin's manipulation crept in through money talk. He'd whisper to Pamela about how I was draining the family with my college costs, even though I had scholarships. Once, he suggested I was hiding extra cash from Mom's savings, planting seeds of doubt. Pamela defended me at first, but Quentin's constant drip of comments wore her down. "You're too soft on her," he'd say. "She's using you as a crutch." I tried talking to Pamela alone, but she'd brush it off. "He's just protective." She'd insist. "You don't understand, because you're still in school." The changes accelerated after they got engaged. Quentin pushed for a fancy ring that stretched Pamela's budget. and he started isolating her from me. Our porch talks vanished, replaced by his plans for their future. He'd mock my financial dreams, saying, "That's cute. But real success comes from connections, not books." Pamela echoed him more each time, her eyes hardening when I shared my progress. Quentin had twisted our bond, turning my sister into someone who saw me as competition rather than family. I wanted to fight it, but the distance grew, setting the stage for that explosive dinner years later. Back in Indianapolis, the tension with Quentin finally boiled over at a family dinner. It was during my last visit home after college graduation. I had flown in to celebrate with Mom and Pamela, excited to share my plans for starting a financial consulting firm in Seattle. The table was set with Mom's pot roast and mashed potatoes, a familiar spread that usually brought comfort. Quentin sat at the head, dominating the conversation with tales of his latest real estate flip. Their relationship moved fast, dates turning into weekends away. Their relationship moved fast, dates turning into weekends away. Pamela hung on his every word, her engagement ring catching the light as she nodded along. As dessert came out, Quentin turned his attention to me. "So, Heidi," he said with a smirk, leaning back in his chair, "heard you're moving to Seattle to chase some big finance dream." "That's ambitious." I smiled politely, sensing the edge in his voice. "Yeah, I've got some solid leads. The market there's booming for consultants helping small businesses with debt management." Pamela glanced at him before chiming in. "Sounds risky. Quentin's doing great with properties here. Why not stay and join us?" The talk shifted to family finances, and that's when Quentin dropped his bomb. "You know, Rita," he said, turning to Mom, "I've been looking over the old accounts. Seems like some money's missing from that inheritance fund your ex left for the girls." His eyes quickly locked on me. "And Heidi's the one who's always been good with numbers." "What are you implying?" I asked, my fork pausing midair. Pamela's face hardened. "He's saying you took it. Heidi, you've been spending like crazy on school stuff." I stared at her, disbelief washing over me. "That's ridiculous. I haven't touched any family money. My scholarships covered everything." Quentin leaned forward, his tone accusatory. "Come on, we all know you've been resentful since the divorce. Maybe you thought you deserved extra." Mom shifted uncomfortably but didn't speak up. Pamela stood suddenly, her chair scraping the floor. "You're lying. Quentin's right. You've always been sneaky with cash." Before I could respond, she slapped me hard across the face, the sting sharp and immediate. "Get out," she yelled, pointing to the door. "We don't need a thief in this house." Mom rose then, her hands trembling as she grabbed my arm and shoved me toward the exit. "You're causing trouble. Heidi, just go." The door slammed behind me, rain starting to fall in the cool Indiana night. I stood on the porch, cheek burning, heart pounding from the betrayal. My own sister and mother had turned on me based on Quentin's lies. That night, I booked the first flight back to Seattle. I didn't call or text. The distance felt necessary, a wall to protect myself from the pain. In Seattle, I rented a tiny apartment downtown and threw myself into building my firm, starting with freelance gigs for local startups. I networked at coffee shops and attended finance meetups. The rain in Seattle mirrored my mood, but it also washed away the hurt over time. I secured my first client, a small tech company needing debt restructuring advice. And word spread. Within months, I had enough to hire an assistant and expand. Shannon Pike became my rock during those early days. We met at a women's business network event, and she saw through my tough exterior. "You're carrying something heavy," she said over coffee one afternoon. I confided in her about the dinner, and she listened without judgment. "Channel it into your work," she advised. "Don't let them define you." Her support kept me going through the long nights crunching numbers and pitching ideas. My firm grew, specializing in helping families avoid financial pitfalls like the ones that destroyed mine. But the scar from that slap lingered, a reminder of how quickly trust could shatter. Over the next decade in Seattle, I built a life from the ground up. That dinner in Indianapolis, where Pamela slapped me and Mom shoved me out, became a scar I carried but refused to let define me. My financial consulting firm took root in a cramped office space near Pike Place Market. I started with small clients, mostly family-owned businesses drowning in debt. Late nights analyzing spreadsheets and cold calling potential investors became my routine. My first big win was landing a contract with a local restaurant chain, saving them from bankruptcy with a tailored debt repayment plan. Word spread, and soon I had a team of 10. Then 20, working out of a sleek downtown office. By year 5, I bought a modern condo overlooking Puget Sound, its floor-to-ceiling windows framing the water that calmed my restless nights. I tried to keep ties with home, though. I sent birthday gifts for Pamela's kids, Tracy and Victor, hoping to stay in their lives despite the rift. Packages of books and science kits went out every year, but they came back unopened, stamped "Return to Sender." Pamela's silence hurt more than I expected. Mom called a few times, her voice hesitant over the line. She'd ask about my work, never mentioning that night, and I'd keep it short. "I'm fine, Mom," I'd say, dodging her attempts to reconnect. The pain was too raw to pretend otherwise. About 6 years in, Mom texted that our grandfather had passed. I flew back to Indianapolis for the funeral, hoping for a chance to mend things. At the cemetery, Pamela stood with Quentin, their kids clinging to her side. Tracy, maybe 4 then, looked at me with curious eyes, but Pamela pulled her away before I could speak. Quentin avoided my gaze, his jaw tight. I approached Mom after the service, my voice low. "Can we talk about what happened?" She shook her head, tears in her eyes. "Not now, Heidi. It's too much." Pamela didn't even look at me as they left, her arm around Victor. I stood alone by the grave, realizing reconciliation wasn't coming. Back in Seattle, Shannon Pike kept me grounded. We'd meet for coffee at a cozy spot near my office, where she'd push me to open up. "You're not your family's mistakes," she'd say, her voice firm but kind. She was a marketing consultant who'd faced her own family drama, and her advice hit home. "Focus on what you're building, not what you lost." I took it to heart, pouring my energy into my firm. We expanded to help mid-sized companies, offering seminars on financial planning that drew crowds. My name started appearing in local business journals. A small feature here, a profile there. I wasn't chasing fame, but the recognition felt like proof I was more than the thief they'd called me. The loneliness crept in, though. Late nights in my condo, I'd stare at the sound, wondering if Pamela ever regretted that slap. I dated briefly, a tech founder named Brian who understood my drive but not my guarded heart. It fizzled after a year. Shannon noticed the weight I carried. "You're allowed to let go," she said one evening over wine. "They don't get to own you." Her words stuck, and I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Susan Reyes, who helped me unpack the betrayal. "It's not about forgiving them yet," she said. "It's about not letting their choices break you." Therapy became my safe space, a place to rebuild myself without their shadows. By year 10, my firm had gone national, with clients in 5 states and a staff of 50. I spoke at industry conferences, sharing strategies to avoid financial ruin. The irony wasn't lost on me. My family's accusations had fueled my expertise. I'd built a life I was proud of. But the calls from Mom slowed to a trickle, and Pamela's silence was absolute. Shannon kept me focused, reminding me I didn't need their approval to thrive. Still, a part of me braced for the day they'd come back, expecting something from the life I'd fought to create. 10 years after leaving Indianapolis. My phone rang with an unknown number. I ignored it at first, focused on a client meeting in my Seattle office overlooking Elliott Bay. But the calls kept coming, 36 in total, within minutes. I finally picked up, and Pamela's voice cut through the line, shaky and urgent. "We need to talk. Heidi, it's an emergency." My stomach knotted, but I agreed to meet them at my condo that evening. When I pulled into the driveway, there they were, Pamela, Quentin, and the kids, Tracy and Victor, standing by a packed SUV with suitcases spilling out. Pamela looked worn, her once perfect hair frizzy and her eyes red from crying. Quentin shifted awkwardly, his polished charm replaced by a defeated slump. Tracy, 10 now, clutched a stuffed bear, while 8-year-old Victor kicked at the gravel, looking bored and confused. The sight of my niece and nephew hit me hard. They were strangers to me because of that night. "What are you doing here?" I asked, keeping my voice steady as I stepped out of the car. Quentin spoke first, his tone forced casual. "We've had some rough times. Heidi, the real estate market crashed, and I lost my job in a company merger." Pamela nodded, wiping her eyes. "The bank foreclosed on our house last month. We're basically homeless." Tracy piped up then. "We stayed in a motel last night. It had a pool. But Dad said we couldn't swim," Victor added, "and the Wi-Fi sucked." Their innocence cut through the tension. But I stayed focused. "So you drove all the way here?" I said. Crossing my arms, Pamela stepped closer. "We thought families should stick together. You have space." "Right. This big place in Seattle." Quentin chimed in. "Just temporary. A few months until I land something. The kids need stability. Schools here are great." I glanced at Tracy and Victor, feeling a pang for what I'd missed, but the memories flooded back. Quentin's accusation, Pamela's slap, Mom's shove. "Why now?" I asked. After 10 years of silence, Pamela's face crumpled. "We were wrong that night. Quentin was stressed, and I overreacted. Mom feels awful too. She's back in Indianapolis, but she told me to reach out. I didn't buy it." The 36 calls felt desperate, not apologetic. Quentin added, "Look, we're broke. No savings left after the mortgage payments piled up. Bankruptcy's next if we don't get help." Tracy tugged at Pamela's sleeve. "Aunt Heidi, do you have a room for us?" Her question stung, reminding me of the family I'd lost. I let them inside for a moment, against my better judgment. The kids marveled at the view of the sound, while Pamela paced the living room. "This place is amazing," she said, glancing at my awards on the shelf. "You've done well." Quentin nodded. "Yeah. We saw your firm in a business article last year. Figured you'd understand hard times." I sat them down, my mind racing through the past. "That dinner wasn't just a mistake," I said. "You accused me of stealing, slapped me, and Mom shoved me out. You cut me off completely." Pamela teared up. "I was protecting my family. Quentin convinced me I cut her off. He manipulated you, and you let him. Now you're here because you're broke." Quentin bristled. "Watch it. We're asking for help, not judgment." The kids sensed the shift, Victor hiding behind Pamela. I took a breath, facing the ghosts of that night. Part of me wanted to slam the door again, but seeing Tracy and Victor made it harder. Still, I wouldn't let them walk over me. "What exactly do you want?" I asked, ready for the ask that would test everything. I decided to offer limited help, but with strict conditions. The next morning, I had my assistant arrange a furnished 3-bedroom apartment in a decent Seattle neighborhood near good schools. It cost me about $2,000 a month, and I agreed to cover it for 6 months. I also emailed Quentin some contacts from my network finance firms looking for experienced real estate pros, but I made it clear in a text to Pamela, "This is temporary. No contact unless it's an emergency. And if there's any more drama. It's done, Pamela replied quickly, thanking me profusely. We'll make it work, she wrote. The kids are thrilled. Quentin's already reaching out to your leads. I didn't respond, focusing instead on my day client meetings and a seminar on debt strategies. Shannon called that afternoon. You're being generous, she said. But watch your back. They've hurt you before. I assured her I had boundaries in place, no staying at my condo, no family dinners, just the basics to get them stable. A few weeks after they moved in, things seemed quiet. I got updates from my assistant on the lease payments, and Pamela sent a photo of Tracy and Victor in their new rooms, smiling with unpacked boxes around them. It tugged at me, seeing my niece and nephew settling in. Maybe this could lead to something positive for them, even if not for us. But then the whispers started. A mutual acquaintance from Indianapolis, now in Seattle, mentioned hearing rumors at a networking event. Quentin's been telling people you manipulated the family finances back home, she said, saying you pushed them out to take control. I froze, the old accusation echoing. Thief then, manipulator now. I dug deeper. Calling a couple of shared contacts, one confirmed Quentin had spread the story during a job interview, claiming I had influenced Mom to cut them off from inheritance funds. It was a lie. I hadn't touched any family money since leaving, but Quentin was using it to paint himself as the victim, probably to explain their sudden move. Pamela must have known, or at least turned a blind eye. That evening, I confronted them over a video call. Why are you spreading lies again? I demanded. Quentin denied it at first. Just venting, he said. People ask questions. Pamela jumped in. He's stressed. Heidi, cut him some slack. We're grateful for the apartment. But their defensiveness confirmed it. Tracy appeared in the background, waving hi. But I ended the call abruptly. My hands shook as I blocked their numbers. Enough was enough. I contacted my lawyer the next day to terminate the lease support after the current month. No more payments, no extensions. I also alerted the contacts I'd given Quentin, explaining the situation briefly without details. One called back, saying they'd passed on him after hearing inconsistencies in his story. Shannon met me for lunch, her support unwavering. You're doing the right thing, she said. They haven't changed. Protect what you've built. The fallout came fast. Pamela tried emailing from a new address, begging for more time. The kids need this, she wrote. Don't punish them for our mistakes. But it was the same pattern, using the children as leverage while Quentin poisoned the well. I didn't reply. Mom called from Indianapolis, her voice pleading. They're struggling. Heidi, can't you help a little longer? I told her no. They crossed the line again. This is permanent. Cutting them off completely felt final, a weight lifting even as it ached. I changed my locks, updated my security, and focused on my firm. No more gifts for Tracy and Victor. No more wondering. The 10 years of silence had taught me self-reliance, and this betrayal sealed it. Quentin's Wukong had backfired, costing them potential jobs and my support. I heard through a distant relative that their apartment lease ended soon, forcing them into a motel. But I was done carrying their chaos. Months after cutting them off, the consequences unfolded for Pamela and Quentin. Word got back through a distant cousin in Indianapolis that their temporary apartment lease had expired without renewal from me. They bounced to a cheap motel on the outskirts of Seattle, the kind with flickering neon signs and thin walls. Quentin's job leads dried up fast once my contacts heard about his rumor spreading. One firm even blacklisted him after verifying the inconsistencies in his stories. Pamela lost her part-time gig at a local cafe when customers complained about her distracted attitude. Their finances spiraled, leading to a bankruptcy filing in King County Court. Chapter 7. The kind that wipes out assets but stains your credit for years. The judge ruled quickly, forcing them to sell Quentin's old SUV and what little they had left. Social isolation hit harder. Old friends from Indianapolis stopped answering calls, tired of the drama and excuses. In Seattle, neighbors whispered about the family who showed up broke and bitter. Pamela tried posting on social media for support, but comments turned ugly. People called out Quentin's lies. Tracy and Victor struggled in school, switching classes mid-year and facing questions about why they moved so suddenly. Pamela blamed me in voicemails I never returned, but the truth leaked out. Their marriage cracked under the pressure. Quentin started staying out late, and arguments echoed through motel walls. A mutual acquaintance mentioned divorce papers being discussed, with custody battles looming. Pamela moved back to Indianapolis with the kids eventually, crashing with Mom in her small apartment. Quentin stayed behind, scraping by on odd jobs, his charm long gone. Mom reached out once more, her voice frail over the phone. "You've destroyed them, Heidi." But I stood firm. They did this to themselves. The betrayal from that dinner night sealed it. No more chances. Shannon celebrated my decision over dinner one evening. "You've protected your peace," she said. "That's what matters." My firm thrived without the distraction, landing major contracts with national chains. I spoke at more conferences, sharing stories of financial recovery that mirrored my own escape from family toxic ties. Looking back, setting those boundaries saved me. Pamela and Quentin's downfall showed the real cost of manipulation and betrayal. Bankruptcy court stripped their facade, social circles abandoned them, and their marriage teetered on collapse. For Gia, the lesson is clear: protect yourself with firm boundaries. Family doesn't mean enduring abuse or lies. Stand your ground, even if it means walking away forever. It's not revenge, it's survival. And in the end, building your own life is the ultimate win.
"You're late," my mom said as she stepped out onto the porch, pulling her suitcase behind her. I glanced at the clock on my dashboard. It was 6:02 a.m. "2 minutes late, Mom," I said, forcing a smile. I got out of the car to help with the luggage, but then I saw her, my sister Lauren, emerging from the house with her own suitcase in tow. My smile froze. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My mom turned to me, her expression far too cheerful for the situation. "Oh, Violet, we decided Lauren should come instead of you. She's been so stressed lately, and she really needs this trip." My chest tightened. "Instead of me?" "Mom, I've been planning this for years. I paid for everything." She waved her hand dismissively as if I'd just pointed out something trivial. "And we're grateful, sweetheart. But you're always working so hard. You can take another trip later. Lauren needs this right now." Lauren didn't even have the decency to look guilty. She just smirked, shifting her weight onto one hip. "Thanks for understanding, sis," she said, her tone dripping with fake gratitude. I stared at the two of them, my heart pounding in my chest. My dad shuffled out a moment later, avoiding eye contact as he handed me his suitcase. "This is unbelievable," I said, my voice shaking. "This was supposed to be our trip. Something for me to share with you." "Well, it still is," my mom said with a smile. "Just with Lauren instead. Don't make this a big deal, Violet. Your sister really needs a break." My name is Violet, and for the past 2 years I've been working overtime, saving every spare penny to give my parents a trip they'd never forget. Flights, luxury hotels, guided tours, I planned every detail down to the last dinner reservation. But as I stood there in my parents' driveway, watching my sister get into the back seat of my car, I realized something I'd been avoiding for years. It didn't matter how much effort I put in. In their eyes, Lauren would always come first. I clenched my jaw, biting back the sharp retort sitting on the tip of my tongue. Instead, I forced a tight smile and opened the trunk. "Let's get going then," I said, my voice flat. If they wanted to prioritize her over me, fine. They could go with her. But I wasn't about to let them enjoy it. The drive to the airport was suffocatingly quiet, except for Lauren's incessant chatter. "Oh my gosh, Mom, did you see that TikTok about Paris? I can't wait to go shopping there. Do you think we'll have time for that, or will the tours take up the whole day?" My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as I stared straight ahead, forcing myself not to say anything. My mom chuckled softly. "Of course we'll have time. We'll figure it out when we get there." I bit the inside of my cheek. When we get there, they didn't even seem to notice I wasn't part of that we anymore. At one point, my dad cleared his throat. "Thank you for driving us, Violet. I know this probably feels unusual." I glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "Unusual? That's an interesting way to put it, Dad." He didn't respond. He just shifted uncomfortably in his seat, probably wishing he hadn't spoken at all. Lauren leaned forward from the back seat, her voice grating. "You're not mad, right? I mean, this is really big of you letting me go. I could never have afforded this on my own." I clenched my jaw and forced a tight smile. "Of course, Lauren. Enjoy the trip." By the time we pulled up to the airport drop-off zone, my patience was hanging by a thread. As I helped unload their luggage, my mom gave me a hug. "Thank you for understanding, sweetheart. This means a lot to us, and to Lauren." I nodded stiffly. "Sure, Mom." Lauren beamed as she wheeled her suitcase toward the entrance. "Thanks, Violet. You're the best." I stood there watching them disappear into the terminal, my chest tight with anger and hurt. The ride back home was a blur. I replayed the conversation in my head over and over, each word cutting deeper than the last. "This means a lot to Lauren. You're not mad, right? You're always working so hard." I parked in my driveway and sat in the car for a few minutes, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Then, without a second thought, I marched into the house, pulled out my laptop, and logged into every travel account I'd used to book the trip. Hotel reservations? Cancelled. Tours? Refunded. Airline upgrades? Nope. I stared at the confirmation emails piling up in my inbox, feeling the tightness in my chest start to ease. They wanted to take Lauren instead of me? Fine. But they wouldn't be staying in 5-star hotels or enjoying private tours on my dime. When I closed my laptop, a sense of satisfaction settled over me. They could explain themselves to the front desk staff in Paris. I was done being their doormat. The calls started as soon as their flight landed. My phone buzzed repeatedly as I unpacked my suitcase, the one I'd packed so carefully for a trip that was no longer mine. The irony wasn't lost on me as I hung up my dresses and neatly placed my shoes back on the shelf. The buzzing continued, filling the room with its relentless vibration. I sighed, picking up the phone and glancing at the screen. My mom's name flashed across it, accompanied by several missed calls and texts. I unlocked the phone and scrolled through the messages. "Violet, what's going on? The hotel won't let us check in. The reservation is missing. Call me immediately. Violet, this isn't funny. Fix this now." A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Fix this? They really thought I'd swoop in and save the day after what they'd done? The phone buzzed again, this time with a call from Lauren. I let it ring out, only for her to leave a voicemail. "Violet, this is so petty," she snapped, her voice dripping with entitlement. "We're stuck here because of you. You need to call the hotel and fix it, now." I rolled my eyes and deleted the voicemail without listening to the rest. For years I'd been their fixer, the one who smoothed over every mistake and picked up every slack. Not anymore. Eventually, I decided to answer, if only to stop the barrage of calls. My mom's voice hit me like a tidal wave of anger as soon as I picked up. "Violet, what did you do? The hotel says the reservation was canceled and none of the tours are booked anymore." I let her rant for a moment, then calmly replied, "I canceled them." There was a long, stunned silence before she hissed, "Why would you do that?" "Oh, I don't know," I said, my tone laced with sarcasm. Maybe because you decided to take Lauren on my trip. You're lucky I even drove you to the airport. We thought you'd understand, she snapped. Understand what? I asked, my voice rising. That years of saving and planning didn't matter because Lauren needed a break? That my hard work meant nothing to you? Guess what, Mom? I don't understand, and I don't care to. I hung up before she could respond and turned my phone off, tossing it onto the couch. The silence that followed was blissful, and I felt like I could breathe again. If they wanted to prioritize Lauren, fine. But they could figure out the rest of the trip without me. The silence lasted only a day. By the next morning, my phone was buzzing again with calls and messages. At first, I ignored them. I spent the day cleaning the house and catching up on work, but curiosity got the better of me by evening. I opened my phone and braced myself for the storm of texts. From my mom, Violet, you've gone too far. Your sister is in tears and your father is furious. We can't get into any of the hotels you booked. From Lauren, you're acting like a child. I don't get why you're making this such a big deal. Just fix it already. And finally from my dad, we need to talk, this isn't right. I set the phone down, shaking my head. For years, I'd been the one to fix things, to make sure everyone was comfortable and happy. Now that I'd taken a step back, they didn't know how to handle it. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat down at the kitchen table, letting the anger simmer. How dare they expect me to clean up their mess? How dare they act like I was the one in the wrong? The next call came minutes later, and this time I answered. Violet, my mom barked before I could say a word. This isn't funny anymore. We're stranded. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? I took a slow sip of my tea. Embarrassing? You think this is embarrassing? Try saving for years, planning every detail, and then being told you're not even part of the trip you paid for. Stop being dramatic, she snapped. Lauren needed this more than you. And now she can figure it out, I said firmly. You made your decision, Mom. You wanted to take Lauren instead of me? Fine, but don't expect me to fund her vacation. We're family, she hissed. We don't do this to each other. I let out a bitter laugh. Funny, I was just thinking the same thing. Lauren's voice came through the background, whining, Mom, just hang up on her, she's being impossible. That was the final straw. Enjoy your trip, I said, my tone icy. Oh, wait, you can't, because it's not your trip. It was mine, and now it's nobody's. Goodbye. I hung up before she could respond and turned my phone off again. For the rest of the evening, I felt an odd mix of anger and relief. Anger that they'd put me in this position, but relief that I'd finally stood up for myself. They could call me dramatic all they wanted. For the first time in my life, I wasn't letting them take advantage of me. The next few days were blissfully quiet. With my phone turned off, I finally had space to think clearly, free from the barrage of guilt trips and accusations. I spent my mornings sipping coffee on my back porch, enjoying the calm I'd craved for so long. My afternoons were filled with work and catching up on little projects I'd been putting off, things that reminded me how capable I was when I wasn't bogged down by their endless demands. But by the third day, curiosity got the better of me. I turned my phone back on to find over a dozen voicemails waiting for me. The first few were from my mom, growing increasingly hysterical with each one. Violet, you need to call me back right now. This has gone too far. I can't believe you're doing this. You've humiliated us. We're your parents. How could you treat us this way? Then came Lauren's messages, full of the same entitled tone she'd always used. This is so petty, even for you. You're ruining everything. Just fix it, Violet. And finally my dad's voice, quieter but no less pointed. Violet, I don't understand what's happened to you. Call us back so we can sort this out. I hesitated before listening to the final voicemail, a long one from my mom. Her voice was quieter this time, tinged with frustration and exhaustion. Violet, she began, we're back at the airport now. The trip is ruined, and I hope you're happy with yourself. Your sister is devastated, and your father and I are, well, disappointed doesn't even begin to cover it. Call us when you're ready to talk." I deleted the voicemails without replying. I wasn't ready to talk, and honestly, I didn't know if I ever would be. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It was the culmination of years of them putting Lauren first and expecting me to accept it with a smile. As the hours passed, I found myself reflecting on all the times I'd been overlooked or dismissed. Every holiday where Lauren's whims dictated the plans. Every family gathering where my accomplishments were treated as afterthoughts. This trip had been the breaking point, but the cracks had been forming for years. That evening, Grace stopped by unannounced, carrying 2 cups of coffee and an unmistakable look of curiosity. "I heard about what happened," she said, setting the coffee on the table. "Your mom called me yesterday." Of course she had. My mom had always been good at recruiting allies when she wanted to guilt me into compliance. "And?" I asked, taking a sip. Grace shrugged, a sly smile creeping across her face. "I told her you were probably busy and would get back to her when you were ready." I laughed, shaking my head. "You're the best." "No, you're the best," she said, her tone suddenly serious. "Because you finally stood up for yourself. I know how hard that is, Violet. Don't let them drag you back down." Her words stuck with me long after she left. Grace was right. I'd spent too long bending over backward to please people who never seemed to care about my efforts. It was time to break that cycle, once and for all. By the time the weekend rolled around, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The anger was still there, simmering under the surface, but it was joined by something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Freedom from their endless expectations. Freedom from being the family's fixer. Freedom to finally live on my own terms. But as expected, the silence didn't last. It was Sunday afternoon when I finally got a call that I decided to answer. This time, it was my dad. "Violet," he began, his voice heavy with weariness. "Your mom wanted me to call. She thinks you'll listen to me." "Go on," I said, leaning back in my chair. He let out a sigh. "Look, this has all gotten out of hand. Your mom's upset, Lauren's furious, and, well, it's just a mess. But you're better than this." I stiffened, his words igniting a fresh wave of anger. "Better than what, Dad? Standing up for myself? Refusing to let you walk all over me again?" "That's not what I meant," he said quickly. "It's just, you've always been the reasonable one. The one who keeps everything together. This isn't like you." I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You're right, it's not like me. Because I'm not bending over backward to clean up your mess." He paused, and for a moment I thought he might finally see my side of things. But then he said, "You're punishing the whole family over one decision. Is that really fair?" "Fair?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you and Mom decided I wasn't important enough to be part of the trip I planned? Was it fair when you replaced me with Lauren like I didn't matter?" "That's not what we were trying to do," he said, his tone defensive now. "We just thought Lauren needed it more." "Of course you did," I snapped. "You always think she needs more attention, more support, more of everything. And I'm always the one expected to sacrifice for her. Not anymore." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Finally, he said, "I don't know what you want me to say." "I don't need you to say anything," I replied, my voice steady. "I just need you to understand that I'm done being the afterthought. From now on, I come first. Violet, goodbye, Dad." I ended the call and set the phone down, my hands trembling. For the rest of the day, I let myself feel everything. Anger, sadness, relief. It wasn't easy, but it felt like the start of something new. I wasn't the family's fixer anymore, and I wasn't going to be. They could figure out how to clean up their own messes. When my parents and Lauren finally returned, I was waiting for them at their house. I'd parked in their driveway, sipping coffee and feeling surprisingly calm as I watched their taxi pull up. As they stepped out, dragging their suitcases behind them, their faces were a mix of exhaustion and irritation. Lauren was the first to speak. "Well, I hope you're happy, Violet." I raised an eyebrow, staying seated on the porch swing. "Happy about what?" "Our trip was a disaster," my mom snapped, waving her hand as if to brush the whole thing away. "We spent the entire week staying in dingy hotels and eating terrible food because we couldn't afford anything decent." "And don't get me started on the tours," Lauren chimed in, crossing her arms. "Oh, wait, there weren't any. Do you know how embarrassing it was to show up and be told there was no reservation?" I took another sip of coffee, letting their complaints wash over me. "Sounds rough," I said finally, my voice calm. "But you wanted to take Lauren, remember? I'm sure you all had some great bonding time." "That's not the point," my mom shot back, her voice rising. "You knew we couldn't afford all the things you'd planned. You set us up to fail." And I stood up, setting my mug down on the small table next to me. "No, Mom, I didn't set you up for anything. I planned a trip for the three of us. Something special I'd been saving for years. You're the ones who decided to cut me out at the last second." My dad finally spoke up, his tone quieter but no less accusatory. "You didn't have to cancel everything, Violet. That was extreme." "Was it?" I asked, folding my arms. "Why should I have paid for a trip I wasn't even invited to? If Lauren needed it so badly, you should have planned it yourselves. You are lucky that I didn't cancel the return flight." Lauren rolled her eyes. "You're so dramatic. It's just money, Violet." "And you're so entitled," I shot back, my patience finally snapping. "Do you have any idea how much work and sacrifice went into planning that trip? Or do you just assume things magically appear for you because someone else takes care of it?" They stood there, stunned into silence for a moment. "I've spent years being the responsible one," I continued, my voice steady but firm. "The one who fixes things, plans things, makes sure everything runs smoothly, and you've spent just as long taking it all for granted." "That's not fair," my mom started, but I held up a hand to stop her. "No, Mom, what's not fair is how you treated me. You chose Lauren over me, like always, so I chose to stop being your doormat. You didn't want me on the trip? Fine. But you don't get to enjoy the benefits of my hard work without me." I grabbed my bag from the porch swing and turned to leave. "I'm glad you're back safely, but don't expect things to go back to the way they were. I'm done." As I walked to my car, I heard them calling after me, their voices a mix of anger and guilt. But I didn't look back. The drive home from my parents' house felt strangely peaceful. For years, every visit had left me emotionally drained, but this time I felt lighter. I'd finally said everything I'd been holding in, and for once, I wasn't worried about their reaction. When I got back to my house, I made a cup of tea and sat on the couch, replaying the confrontation in my head. They'd been so sure I'd fold, that I'd give in like always. But watching their stunned faces as I walked away was a reminder of how much I'd changed. They could be angry, hurt, or embarrassed. It didn't matter anymore. I was done living my life to meet their expectations. The next day, I got a call from Grace. "How'd it go?" she asked, not bothering with pleasantries. I laughed, leaning back against the kitchen counter. "Exactly like you'd imagine. They're furious, Lauren's pouting, and Mom is probably trying to figure out how to guilt me back into line." Grace let out a snort. "Let her try. You've got a backbone now, and I'm here to make sure it stays in place." I grinned, grateful for her unwavering support. "Thanks, Grace. I mean it. You've been my rock through all of this." "Anytime," she said, her voice softening. "So what's next for you, now that you're not playing family fixer anymore?" That question had been circling in my mind since the confrontation. What was next? For years, so much of my energy had been poured into trying to please my family, trying to earn their approval. Now that I'd let go of that burden, the possibilities felt endless, and a little intimidating. "I don't know yet," I admitted, "but I feel like I get to decide. Not them, Not anyone else. Just me. Sounds like the start of something amazing, Grace said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Over the next few weeks, I started making small changes that felt big in their own way. I redecorated my living room, swapping out the hand-me-down furniture from my parents for pieces that felt uniquely mine. I spent weekends exploring local cafes and parks, things I'd always meant to do but never made time for. And I started journaling, writing down my thoughts and dreams without filtering them through the lens of what anyone else might think. Each small step felt like reclaiming a part of myself I hadn't realized I'd lost. One evening, I sat down with my laptop and opened the spreadsheet I'd used to plan the trip. The canceled reservations stared back at me, and I didn't feel a pang of regret. Instead, I felt a surge of determination. That money had been meant for a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and I wasn't going to let it go to waste. Closing the spreadsheet, I opened a new browser tab and typed, "Solo travel ideas." A few weeks after my parents' return, I booked a solo trip to Italy. It wasn't the same itinerary I'd planned for them, and it wasn't about proving a point anymore. This was for me, a chance to celebrate my independence and finally put myself first. The moment I landed in Rome, I felt a surge of excitement and nervousness. I'd never traveled alone before, but as I stepped out of the airport and into the bustling city, I knew I'd made the right decision. I spent my days wandering cobblestone streets, marveling at ancient ruins and indulging in meals at charming little cafes. There was no schedule, no one else to consider, just me and the freedom to do exactly what I wanted. One afternoon, while sitting on the Spanish steps with a gelato in hand, I pulled out the journal I'd brought with me. For years, I'd written about what I wanted to achieve, but those dreams were always wrapped up in making someone else happy. Now, as I wrote, the focus shifted. Learn a new language, start a small business, travel to at least 5 more countries. The list grew, each goal a reflection of the life I wanted to create, not the one I'd been expected to live. On my last night in Florence, I had dinner at a small family-run restaurant overlooking the Arno River. As I watched the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, I felt a deep sense of peace. This trip had been more than just a vacation, it was a turning point. I'd spent so much of my life trying to earn my family's approval, but here, thousands of miles away, I realized something important. I didn't need it. I was enough, just as I was. When I returned home, my parents tried to reach out again, this time with softer tones and carefully worded messages. "Hope you had a nice trip," one text from my mom read. "Maybe we can all talk soon?" I stared at the message for a moment before setting my phone down. I wasn't ready to reply, and that was okay. This time, it would be on my terms. As I unpacked my suitcase and placed souvenirs on my shelves, I felt a sense of pride. A week after returning from my trip, I received a call from my mom. This time I answered. "Hi, Violet," she began, her tone unusually soft. "How was your trip?" "It was amazing," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "That's good to hear," she said, pausing as if searching for the right words. "We've been thinking a lot about what happened. Maybe we handled things poorly." The admission surprised me, but I wasn't ready to let her off the hook just yet. "Poorly? You replaced me on a trip I planned and paid for without even asking. Poorly is an understatement." "I know," she said quietly. "Your dad and we didn't realize how much it would hurt you." "And Lauren?" I asked. "Does she feel bad too, or is she still blaming me for ruining her vacation?" "She's upset," my mom admitted. "But I think she knows she could have handled things better." I sighed, leaning against the counter. "Mom, this wasn't just about the trip. It's about years of putting her first and expecting me to pick up the slack. I'm not doing it anymore." "I understand," she said after a moment. "We're going to try to do better. We don't want to lose you." Her words tugged at something deep inside me, but I'd learned enough not to let guilt dictate my choices. "I'm glad to hear that," I said. "But it's going to take more than words to fix this. I need to see real effort, not just apologies." You will, she promised. We'll give you the space you need, but I hope you'll let us back in someday. After the call, I felt a mix of emotions: relief that they were finally acknowledging their behavior, and skepticism about whether they'd actually change. But as I sat down with my journal that evening, I realized something important. Whether or not they changed wasn't my responsibility. Over the following months, I kept my boundaries firm. I responded to their calls and texts when I felt like it, but I didn't go out of my way to fix things or smooth over conflicts. Instead, I focused on building the life I wanted. I signed up for a photography class, something I'd always dreamed of doing but never had the time or energy for. I joined a local hiking group and even started planning my next solo trip. Each step I took felt like reclaiming another part of myself. One day, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset, I realized how far I'd come. I wasn't the person who bent over backward for people who didn't appreciate me. I was someone who valued herself, who set boundaries, and who wasn't afraid to stand up for what she deserved. I felt truly free.